I'm just starting the live stream. Assalamu alaikum. Nice to see you there. Feels right. Let's see. Right. Assalamu alaikum again. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin fil awwalin wa salli alayhi fil akhirin wa salli alayhi ya Rabbil Alamin ala ila al-Din. Welcome everyone. For anyone who's coming to the Majlis for the first time, welcome. So we're happy and honored to have you here. Inshallah, the first of many visits. And we'll talk to you more about that at the end, inshallah. And of course, we want to welcome Sheikh Yousef. Ma'alish, I want to say a few things. Sheikh Yousef, mashallah, we're very, mashallah. How are you? Alhamdulillah. Honored to have you.
Mashallah.
Sheikh Yousef, first of all, I want to say thank you to Bayan Islamic University, because they're the ones that actually brought Sheikh Yousef out for a program today working around issues related to zakat and how we can think about how we use zakat as communities. MashaAllah, he's done some research on this topic and published on it in the tenets. So we're very happy, alhamdulillah, that he's here and we had the opportunity to have him here at the Majlis. Sheikh Yousef is an Azhari in the true sense of the word, in my opinion. And my opinion doesn't mean a whole lot, but there's people when you're raised in the system, it has certain consequences. So you'll see, like what my wife always says, is that there's no one like the Azharis who will give you despair because of how much they know. Like the amount of knowledge that they have, you as someone who's not raised in the system, you deal with it, you just feel like there's no way that I can ever be a person of knowledge because the way that these people are, mashallah. And Sheikh Yousef, mashallah, is someone who came up in the system, memorized the 10 qira'at, worked a lot of very advanced knowledge in Shafi'i fiqh and fiqh in general, and all the different ulum, mashallah. Then when he came to North America, he did his LLM, comparative law degree, and focused on divorce and how divorce happens in these lands and how that relates to Islamic law and things like this. Then he did another master's in Chicago, and now he's doing his PhD, mashallah. And he's also, I think, the director of Quranic studies at Yaqeen, right? Yeah, so alhamdulillah, and works also as an imam at some level at Mecca Center in Chicago. So mashallah, wearing many kufis, and we're very honored to have him and to hear from him. And barakallahu fikum, Sheikh. If you need anything, you can tell.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق أجمعين سيدنا محمد عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا وعملا صالحا متقبلا ورزقا حلالا طيبا يا أكرم الأكرمين. I begin in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, most gracious and the most merciful, and I ask Allah to send His blessings and greetings upon our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family and his companions, and all of our righteous predecessors. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. First of all, it's genuinely an honor for me to be here. MashaAllah, Jazakum khairan, Sheikh Jamal, for the invitation, Sheikh Fuad, barakallahu feekum, and all the Mashaykh and the brothers and sisters and the elders in the crowd. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless this gathering. May Allah continue to gather you together, inshallah, on the haqq and and learning his deen and learning the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I hope you weren't deceived so much by this very generous introduction, Sheikh Jamal. I feel like now I'm very intimidated to say anything. But really the hope, inshallah, was to share some reflections on the topic of Al-Quran, Tadabbur Al-Quran, or connecting with the Quran, reflecting on the meanings of the Quran. And as you can tell, it's a very broad topic. We can cover it from so many different angles. That's why I'm going to pick some points. Some of them might sound randomly connected to some of you, but the point is really to engage, inshallah, in a meaningful discussion on how to develop, hopefully, a stronger connection with the Quran, how to think, or how to bring the Quran more relevant to our daily life, to our everyday life matters and situations that we deal with. And let me begin with a hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, reported in different riwayat, in different versions. One of them by Sayyiduna Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. It's an authentic hadith reported in multiple authentic collections, in which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "لم يأذن الله لشيء ما أذن للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أن يتغنى بالقرآن." لم يأذن الله لشيء ما أذن للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أن يتغنى بالقرآن. Different version of the hadith, maybe more popular. من لم يتغنى بالقرآن فليس منا. The second one is in Bukhari. Different other versions about the same meaning. The first thing, there are two words that I would like to highlight here. The first one is لم يأذن. لم يأذن الله. For those who enjoy translation, what's the first meaning that comes to mind when you hear the word يأذن? لم يأذن الله. What does it mean? What does يأذن mean? It's a verb, just to make it easier. Allah has not, lam, it's a negation article, يأذن. Just the first meaning that comes to mind, just permit or allow, right? From idhn to give a permission to do something. So Allah has not allowed a prophet to do something as much as he allowed the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to yataghanna bil Quran. We'll come back to this second word. However, this is not really the exact meaning of ya'dhan here. What could be another meaning of ya'dhan? Think of another derivative of the word ya'dhan. From adhan, almost there. What else? Sorry? A call. Okay, adhan, call. Close. Udun. Yes. You see, there is a relationship between ya'dhan and udun, right? That's why the verb from that. Now we get into morphology. The verb, are you saying adina or adana, right? So it's a verb that there's a verb that says adina. Adina means to give permission, to permit, or to allow something to happen. Adana, if it's with the fatha on the second letter and the dal, there is a different meaning. It's from udun, which means ears. So here, lam ya'dhanillah ma'na, the meaning is Allah wouldn't hear or listen to. The most important thing that Allah loves listening to is His Prophet reciting the Quran. So it's a whole different meaning than, again, to give permission to read the Quran. And also that probably makes more sense than giving permission to read the Quran. Now it's from the verb adana, which means, as we say in English, like you give full ears to something, or you give you full attention to something. It's something very similar to this meaning. Now the second word is what I actually want to focus on even more. What does yataghanna bil Quran mean? And again, forgive my annoying questions. Yataghanna, what's the first meaning that comes to mind? Recite. You don't know Arabic? Okay, we'll try. We're gonna do an educated guess about this. So yataghanna, recite, to sing, right? The word ghina is pretty common from singing, right? Recite, sing, what else? Think of more creative derivations that might come to your mind. Yeah, these are very expected, right? Yataghanna means recite, sing, they're close when we think of recitation with a kind of a beautiful tone and melody. But now let's think of a little bit different derivatives that we haven't probably considered. So, to be enriched, ghina. So that's another derivative. There's the idea of ghina, finding it enough, finding it kind of sufficient for you from ghina. Now, any other thoughts or meanings? So in the hadith tradition, hadith commentary tradition, we have 6 different meanings of this yataghanna. Scholars have offered 6 different dimensions to this verb of yataghanna, and that applies to the other versions of the hadith. Laysa minna, by the way, the other narration that I mentioned, Laysa minna man lam yataghanna bil Quran, the one who does not yataghanna bil Quran, doing this recitation, singing, sufficient, enriching, will determine the meaning together, is not one of our community. So he's, this what should make us think more about something beyond having a beautiful voice. Because like that's a gift from Allah. If I don't have a beautiful voice, I'm not one of the community. Or if I'm trying, let's say the meaning is not to really have a natural beautiful voice, it's about you trying to really chant when you recite the Quran. Try just like to be to put some effort into really beautifying how you recite the Quran. But let's say I can't for whatever reason. What this hadith applies to me. So that should make us think like maybe there's another dimension to the meaning of yataghanna. So there are 6 different meanings. The very first one is, I think the first one that came to our minds, tahseen al-sawt. Trying to make your voice beautiful, trying to beautify your voice, or having a little bit of kind of, again, a beautiful tone when you recite the Quran. And we have multiple reports about this. We have the story of Dawood alayhi salam, who had a beautiful voice. And we have some historical reports about him having thousands of different tones. People are very kind of obsessed with maqamat and melodies and tones when it comes to reciting the Quran. So like Sayyidina Dawood alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gifted him with a very beautiful voice. And when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam wanted to praise the voice of one of his companions, Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, he wanted to liken him to Dawood. لَقَدْ أُوتِيتَ مِزْمَارًا مِنْ مَزَامِيرِ آلِ دَاوُد. You've been given a flute. This is literally the mizmar, what mizmar means, like that of the family of Dawood, which they were known even before the Prophet ﷺ, in the kind of the biblical tradition, that he had a very beautiful voice. And Allah said that the nature will actually just like relax and listen to Dawood when he recites. The birds, the mountains, يَا جِبَالُ أَوِّبِي مَعَهُ وَالطَّيْرِ, will actually just like really be in a very that tranquil spiritual status when Sayyidina Dawood alayhi salam recites the Quran. And there are a lot of stories historically about him. People, their mental health getting a lot better when they hear his recitation. People were actually physically sick and ill, and they will actually be cured by the beautiful voice. And of course, the spiritual profound barakah in the recitation of revelation from Allah by Dawood alayhi salam. So the idea of tahseen al-sawt, of having a beautiful voice when you recite the Quran, is pretty common in the tradition, and of course understood from this hadith as well. The second meaning is what Shaykhna Shaykh Jamal mentioned about istighna, finding the Quran enough for you. So ما أذن للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أن يتغنى بالقرآن, that the most important thing is for him to find whatever he needs in the Quran. And that's a very tough test, right? Are we really finding what we want in the Quran? And when we face anything in life, whether it's a major question that we can't answer or a personal problem that we're going through, it's not just a cliche to say read Quran, right? I went to the masjid as a sheikh, right? Heard the khutbah, read Quran. That's not just like kind of a cliche advice because the sheikh doesn't have something else to say, right? It means really something. And it really puts the burden on you, not on the sheikh or the person who's giving you advice, right? Because all these ideas of barakahs from the Quran, they're really dependent on the recipient. So I don't want to get on a tangent here, but really, even when we think of ruqya, right? And people say, like, if you have some troubles, ruqya is important. And it is, of course, important. But ruqya is not just like some kind of magical things that you're going to chant and recite. I need to understand the meanings and khalas, all of a sudden I'm going to be good. That's not really the point of ruqya. The ruqya reflects your deep faith in what you're listening to or reciting yourself, right? If somebody, for example, doesn't really care, or not care, but is not really invested and interested in the meanings of these verses recited by means of curing and ruqya, if you read the entire Quran 10 times, it's not really going to affect them, right? So it's not quantitatively, it's not really about like, or it's not just a secret, oh, I know which ayah that would solve this problem. We have mujarrabat, we have things that scholars have experimented until like, we tried Ayat al-Kursi, Allah and there's barakah. Of course, we have hadith about the virtues of this ayah. So it has some kind of, we believe in these kind of secret spiritual effects of these ayat. But that's just one element of the curing process of whatever we're curing ourselves from. But your receptiveness of what the ayat being recited to you are telling in their meanings is the primary condition for this ayat to be influential and impactful and whatever you want inshallah, to cure. So istighna is, again, one of the meanings that finding the Quran enough for you. That's basically a simple description. Imam Abu Ubaid al-Qasim ibn Salam, an early scholar of Quran, he kind of mentioned this opinion, didn't really support it that much, but he said it's a kind of an opinion. There's a line of a verse of poetry that a pre-Islamic poet used this word in that sense. That means this could be a valid interpretation of the hadith. However, some scholars didn't like this interpretation. And if you used to the tradition, you find these all back and forth debates about these things. They said, well, derivatively it makes sense, but the context of the hadith doesn't really mean that much. They don't contest the idea, of course, of finding the Quran enough and sufficient for you. Of course, nobody debates that. But the point is, does that apply to this very particular hadith? If specifically, if we take ya'dan to mean that listening or hearing, he said, we're not very sure if that qualifies. But it is one interpretation that was mentioned. A third interpretation, some scholars, a few scholars actually. Sure. I'm going to try to keep going, inshallah. Hopefully you'll be able to listen to me. A third interpretation, some scholars said from ghina, from singing, and again, that's for people who are interested in maqamat and aswat and melodies. They said the meaning of it is at-tahzeen, meaning reciting the Quran, simple translation, in a sad tone. So, reciting the Quran in a sad tone. Or exhibiting, reflecting a feeling of concern / sadness when you're reciting the Quran. That general, yes, is like this, what the hadith is saying. So it looks like that particular style of recitation is really loved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's interesting because should the Quran really trigger huzn, sadness when we read it? And by the way, Imam Ghazali, I remember he mentioned something that huzn is a very major theme in the Quran. Sadness, if you take literal translation, is a very major theme in the Quran. But the tricky part when we talk about this today, 2025, in Southern California, is that we fall in the trap of conflating spiritual terms in the tradition with today's psychological mental health terminologies. So when you read a hadith about the Prophet ﷺ, كان صلى الله عليه وسلم in كتب الشمائل, كان صلى الله عليه وسلم متواصل الأحزان. The Prophet ﷺ was always concerned, sad, something around that translation, continuously. And actually used the word ahzan, it's a plural, like he moves from one stressful situation to the other. But you find other ahadith about the Prophet ﷺ being always smiling, right? Sometimes laughing. People recognize his teeth and certain parts of his teeth because of how much they see him laughing, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's playing with kids, he's playing with his grandkids. So how can we reconcile that? We read stories about the Sahaba, they literally fainted when they heard Quran, right? Or a Sahabi who, and the Prophet ﷺ, who would read one ayah in a rak'ah of qiyam and just crying over and over for hours during the night. And you see stories about Umar ibn al-Khattab, that very typical example of an alpha male, that very intimidating, that is like, if you like, emotionless, hasha radiallahu anhu. Like you read stories about him, like how he actually, one of the Sahaba who was reported to have fainted when he heard the beginning of Surah Al-Tur about inna adhaba rabbika lawaqi'. Indeed, the punishment of your Lord is real. It's gonna inevitably happen. And he just faints. So when you read these stories, you ask like, okay, so should I develop a sense of anxiety when I approach Quran, when I approach my religion? And where to draw the line? So if we just use a kind of a general approach to this, because that's not typically the topic of what I focus on, is developing a sense of spiritual anxiety is actually not bad. Mental anxiety, of course, is bad, and may Allah protect all of us. So in a psychological or clinical sense, of course, that's bad. May Allah, again, protect all of us and cure anybody who's going through this. But when we think of spiritual anxiety, and this is how we should read these stories, whether from the Sahaba or the early generations of this ummah, they did have spiritual anxiety. So Abu Bakr said, I will never feel safe until I'm in Jannah. If I have only one foot in Jannah and the other foot is not, I'm not going to feel safe. And that's Abu Bakr, okay? So we're talking about like, I don't know who else we can think about to be better than Abu Bakr after the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam. It's Siddiq. Imagine somebody, the Prophet looked at him and said, you're in Jannah. So, khalas, yani, like, why is he really that much concerned? He said, La a'manu makr Allah. I don't know what Allah will do to me. I don't know if my heart will change. I know something is going to happen. Until I die, just until I die, until Yawm al-Qiyamah. And then if I have only one foot in Jannah, that's not enough. If I have 2 foot in Jannah, khalas. Now, at that time, I can have that beautiful kind of sigh, alhamdulillah, I've made it. Now, no stress anymore. And the Quran says that, right? In Jannah, no stress, no sadness. So these terms in the Quran, in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, in the tradition, when you understand them, I think that kind of distinction between what we mean by these words, and they cause a lot of confusion. And specifically sometimes with young generation attending khutbah, then the khatib is just giving an example or translating literally an ayah or a hadith or a report. We conflate this meaning a lot. The concept of, I remember one brother once in the masjid said, the khatib was saying, you should always doubt your intention. And he said, my kids were with me. It was one of the days that were off at school. And then he said, the kids was telling me, like, they keep telling us at school, don't doubt yourself. Don't doubt your judgment. Be yourself. How can I make sense of that? And this is like one of the very few times I have Friday off to come to listen to the khatib, and they're like 11, 12 years old. And that's a very legitimate question. Like, is he talking about the same thing that the teacher is telling us, or these are 2 different things? That was the question. And really the Imam, the point wasn't to literally doubt yourself. It's about, we have this concept of refining your intention. Make sure you're sincere. If you feel like your intention is mixed with other kind of non-sincere objectives, work on that and try to purify your intention. That's the concept that the khatib or the Imam was indicating. But the kid that was there didn't really kind of get that difference between these 2 concepts. Anyway, back to the hadith. يتغنى. He said this 3rd interpretation is that tahzeen, really in a kind of sad voice that reflects your state of taqsir, that you're not giving the Quran its due. You're not really, you have a lot of shortcomings, and you should think about your shortcomings when you read the Quran. Because one of the simple yet very profound characteristics of the Quran is that it's very simple. Very simple, very straightforward. You can't find a text that is more straightforward than this. But at the same time, the commandment is very difficult. That's why one of the most beautiful examples, aside from the Prophet ﷺ, is Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. Very simple example. And really being given that title of a Siddiq, the most profoundly truthful human being that walked on earth after the Prophet ﷺ in this ummah. When you read his stories, like, it sounds simple. And even I think there's some reports, whether it's some of them are debatable in terms of historical authenticity, that the Prophet ﷺ told the Sahaba, مَا سَبَقَكُمْ أَبُو بَكْرٍ بِكَثِيرِ صِيَامٍ وَلَا صَلَاةٍ. Abu Bakr did not outdo you because of how much praying and fasting he offered. وَلَكِنْ بِشَيْءٍ وَقَرَ فِي قَلْبِهِ. It's because of something that was deeply kind of rooted in his heart. That really what made him special. That really what made Umar al-Khattab trying to compete with him over and over, specifically on sadaqah. And then one day he said, I gave up, I cannot. I decided today on, I will never compete with Abu Bakr because I can't. That's a whole different level. He took half of his wealth and he went to the Prophet ﷺ and said, like, khalas, now I'm going to be the first and the one who contributed much. And then he found Abu Bakr coming to the Prophet ﷺ saying, I brought everything I have for you. So Umar said, like, khalas, there's no way. I really cannot do more than that. So the simplicity of Abu Bakr is really what we're trying to find in the Quran. Very simple, very easy to understand, right? If we now want to lay out the major objectives in the Quran, we're not going to find really a lot of debates about them between this crowd. But commitment and the style of commitment to this is really the big test that we go through for the entirety of our life. Let's move to the 4th interpretation. So tahzeen is the 3rd one. And then the 4th one, he said, another derivative from yataghanna could be yanshagil. So yanshagil, shughul means to be very preoccupied with something, or to be literally busy with something. So yataghanna bil Quran, يعني التشاغل bil Quran. You need to be very busy with the Quran, meaning that's not a good translation. You're very occupied. The thought of the Quran is really occupying your mind. You're thinking about the Quran a lot. You're thinking about your relationship with the Quran. You recite the Quran regularly. That's the idea of tashagul, being always committed to reciting the Quran. A 5th interpretation, he said, يتغنى is also you finding something فيه غناء. You find something sweet. You find something beautiful. التلذذ. You really find enjoyment and pleasure in whether listening or reciting the Quran. That's a valid morphological derivative to understand from the hadith, and also, of course, applies to the Quran as well. The 6th and the last interpretation was, he said, يتغنى to make the Quran your ongoing adas, to يجعله عادة, to always keep it like your connection with the reading the Quran is habitual for you. Something that you didn't really need to put a lot of effort to convince yourself to read your, let's say, daily word of the Quran. It's something that you find it easy and you find it loved by your nafs, and something that you also, it becomes a habit. It's something that regular commitment to the Quran. All these are 6 different interpretations. Which one of them is the most correct? Does anybody have a strong feeling or opinion about one of these 6 to be like the correct or the most correct? So the others could be generally correct, but this like the most. Inshallah, to be always connected to the Quran. Okay. Yes. Ada. Okay, so that developing a habitual kind of connection and regularity.
2 or 6.
2?
2 or 6.
2 or 6. Can you say that?
2 is the iqna.
Okay, finding it enough for you. Okay,
the
and the ada.
yeah.
Okay, jazakallah khair. Any other thoughts? الجمع أولى من الترجيح. الله أكبر. Okay. So in layman translation of what the Sheikh has said is that to combine all meanings together, to be simultaneously correct about the same thing, is given priority over picking one opinion over the other. And that's, by the way, that's a beautiful characteristic of our tradition. So people when they open books of tafsir or hadith, like commentaries, they freak out. Oh my God, like 50 opinions about whatever. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Yes, in a lot of situations, you're going to find contradictory opinions. I'm not saying this does not exist. But in many situations, specifically the commentarial traditions, Quran and Sunnah, you find a lot of opinions, like this one. Sometimes you find 20 and 30. That exists a lot, actually. But you'll find 2 common phenomena. One, a lot of them, if not sometimes all of them, will be really simultaneously applicable to the same word. And this idea of multi-layered meaning in the Quran specifically is very common. And again, not to go on a tangent, that's one of the beauties of qira'at, of the variant readings of the Quran. Same word is pronounced in 2, 3 different ways. Everyone is adding a layer of the meaning, right? Is one qira'ah correct and the other not? No, they're all valid, they're all correct, they're all canonical, they're all recited by from the time of the Prophet ﷺ until today. So the Quran, but everyone is adding a layer that would enrich our experience, reflecting on the text, maybe add a layer that help us derive a legal understanding or a theological point, whatever the ayah is talking about, it enriches that. So the multi-layer meanings of the Quran is something that applies to the Quran, of course, and to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So it's one of the beauties of our tradition. You see that a lot in tafsir, you see that a lot of in hadith. Again, that's a really beautiful kind of also healthy and sign of how rigorous the Islamic scholarship was. Okay, if we apply all these meanings together, then it looks like our relationship with the Quran is something that obviously transcends mere recitation. Tajweed is important, right? You have to learn Tajweed. We struggle, but we have to learn it, right? Ra is very difficult to understand, but try. Dad is even more, try. So we try to do that, and a lot of us will have bad experiences with Quran teachers, whether when you're young or sometimes even when you're adult. But it's generally speaking, is understood to be fard, to obligatory to, in a way, perfect your recitation of whatever Quran you have memorized. If you open the Mus'haf, hopefully you're able to just read the basic text in an articulate manner. But again, that's not just the purpose of the Quran. Allah Himself said in the Quran, "Kitabun anzalnahu ilayka mubarakun." A book, a blessed book that we have sent down to you. لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ, so that they may ponder or reflect on its verses. The lam here, again, for people who like textual analysis or interpretation. لِيَدَّبَّرُوا. This is a lam, it's a preposition, lam, and it's known to be a causative lam, lam al-sababiyya. It explains the sabab, it explains the reason for whatever preceded it. So we have sent down this blessed book to you because, this is basically the meaning. Because the purpose, sababiyya, so it talks about the purpose and the objective behind doing something. The reason we sent it down to you, that you ponder and reflect on the meanings. That's the ultimate goal. Memorization is important, right? Tajweed is very important, obviously. But the point here is that these are steps towards having a meaningful connection with the Quran, and the most meaningful connection will be through the understanding and reflecting on the meanings. What was the very first ayah in the Quran revealed to the Prophet ﷺ? Iqra, right? Surah Al-Alaq. اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. We always brag about this. We as Muslims, I mean. We always brag and we say, نحن أمة اقرأ. We are the ummah, the community of iqra, of read. And that denotes knowledge. And we are knowledge and education-based civilization. And everything is about knowledge and education. So, and the very first word the Prophet ﷺ received was iqra. So we take a lot of pride in that. I know my tone sounds that I disagree. I don't. But like I want us to just think about something beyond this point of, again, taking pride into this, which is very legitimate. But just like, it's not just about that. And really the way that would enable us to understand what actually iqra means is to go back in time together and think about that very particular moment. The very first time the Prophet ﷺ received this word. Just a quick background, and I'm sure all of us know the background. So that's the very first time. Before that, he didn't know he's a prophet, right? He's a very decent, trustworthy individual in Mecca. Everybody respects him. People actually call him a Sadiq al-Amin, right? Even though everybody flipped after he said, I'm a prophet, as if they didn't know him before. And he told them, فَقَدْ لَبِثْتُ فِيكُمْ عُمْرًا مِنْ قَبْلِهِ. Come on, I've been living amongst you. And now after I'm telling you, La ilaha illallah, you tell me you're a majnoon, you're insane, you're a magician, you're making stuff up, you're quoting the tales of the ancient and all these silly accusations. Like, فَقَدْ لَبِثْتُ فِيكُمْ عُمْرًا. Like, I've been living for 40 years amongst you. Like, he lived with them before he became a prophet, way more than he lived after he became a prophet. So everybody really respected him, and we have a lot of stories about that. He belonged what we would qualify today as kind of middle class, socioeconomically speaking. He's married to Lady Khadija, radiallahu anha, very respected, honorable woman. She had very successful business. He also did business with her, so his financial situation became a lot better. And actually, scholars said the ayah in Surah Al-Duha, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is listing the favors that he gave the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, وَوَجَدَكَ عَائِلًا فَأَغْنَى. And we found you in need, basically financially, and we gave you rizq and sustenance. He said, فَأَغْنَاكَ بِخَدِيجَةٍ. Said, we made you financially stable through Khadija. This a ni'mah, favor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself is telling his most beloved one that your financial stability is through your wife. And this is a ni'mah, a favor that I gave you. And see how the union of marriage can be really a source of blessing for a couple. So he's in our language today, he was good, right? He doesn't really need anything. He doesn't need really a position of authority. He doesn't need much more money. He's good. He's happy. And again, in our very materialistic sense, he didn't really feel something is missing. Yet he did. He felt this cannot be what life is about. As we know, he started going to these solitary retreats, into the cave of Hira, trying to reflect, had no idea about prophecy, right? Prophethood, and I'm sorry for Sheikh Fuad about getting a little bit into kalam. Prophethood is just a gift from Allah, right? Nobody applies for it, right? وَلَمْ تَكُنْ نُبُوَّةٌ مُكْتَسَبَةٌ. Nubuwwah, prophecy, is just a gift. That's why we see Al-Mustafa, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What does it mean? The chosen one. So it's not like, oh, he's the most righteous person. Yes, Anbiya are the most righteous people, but it's not because they're the most righteous people, then they qualify to become prophets. That's not how it works. It's istifa. It's mere choosing by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he didn't know at all that he will become a prophet. Yes, he started seeing these irhasat, these kind of cursory indications about certain interesting things that are happening to him, but it's not an easy guess to say like, okay, now I'm going to be a prophet and have to do all of that. He started going to the cave of Hira, and then the very first time Jibreel came to him, and that's really the point I want to get to Iqra. So Jibreel showed up, and the famous hadith by Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha in Bukhari, Jibreel showed up. He doesn't know his name is Jibreel or anything. He doesn't even know what an angel is in the Islamic sense as we know now. The first thing Jibreel did, what was the first thing that Jibreel did? Before he grabbed him. Did he grab him first or say Iqra first? Iqra, right? He said read. So some scholars actually asked this question. They said, why didn't Jibreel say Assalamu alaikum? That's not just a kind of a funny, just being brain teaser thing. It's actually, they said that for a purpose. And I'm hoping to share these remarks to, again, appreciate how the tradition works. She said, why didn't he say Assalamu alaikum? It's like, why are you asking this question? Maybe he didn't want to say that. And they said, no, because when we observe the angelic practices in the Quran, when they visit people, they say Assalamu alaikum. Where did that happen? Ibrahim alayhi salam. قالوا سلاما قال سلام, right? They came to Ibrahim alayhi salam, said salam, and he said salam. So like they exchanged salam first. It was a very stressful situation, as we know. Like it wasn't just like a casual kind of encounter. No, it was a stressful situation. Yeah, they said salam alaikum, and then he responded to salam. So he's like, why didn't Jibreel do that? Oh, okay. So yeah, but he had already been chosen. So it wouldn't be wrong to still tell him salam, even though the Prophet ﷺ doesn't know yet that he's become prophet. That's a good point. The Prophet doesn't know yet that he's a prophet, but he would have still said salam. He's coming here to tell him, you are the chosen one. And then I'm giving you revelation to preach to people. But it looks like the element of surprise was very, very intended. That's not just surprise. So what did he do after he said read? The Prophet said, Ma ana biqari. Right? By the way, I know we translate it as I don't know. Basically, I don't know what to read, or I don't know how to read. And I have many reflections on these translations because my argument is that I don't think the Prophet ﷺ understood this to be a literal command to read the text. He feels like he wants me to do something beyond just like read these words, right? And this is what I want to really get to from this reflection I'm doing in Iqra. It's not just like, here's this text, open this book, read. That wasn't really the point. It's part of it, obviously. So the literacy part is part of it, but that's not really the main goal here. So that's why the Arabic sentence the Prophet used is very interesting. He said, Ma ana biqari. Like, you can understand it to be like, I don't know what to read. Maybe you can also understand, I don't know how to read. But like, it denotes that like, I don't understand what's going on here. Basically, that's what he's telling him. So what Jibreel did is he grabbed him physically. He hugged him. And the hadith said, Nabi ﷺ is narrating, حَتَّى بَلَغَ مِنِّي الْجَهْدِ. Then you read it again. I'm sorry about too much grammar and morphology. You read it in both as an object, and as a subject of the sentence as well. حَتَّى بَلَغَ مِنِّي الْجَهْدُ حَتَّى بَلَغَ مِنِّي الْجَهْدَ. So you read it in two different ways, that until I became very fatigued, I'm very exhausted, right? I'm done. Like it's a very, very squeezing hug that it was very, very painful to me. Or actually, the other interesting reading of this depends on the diacritic mark here, would be until Jibreel put all of his force into doing this. Imagine an angel with all these descriptions that we see in the books about how strong an angel is. So it was very, very aggressive. Then he released him and he said, read. So why again? And the Prophet was like, Ma ana biqari. I don't know what you want me to do. He grabs him again. He does the same thing. And the Prophet used the same exact description, حَتَّى بَلَغَ مِنِّي الْجَهْدُ sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, until like I'm very, very exhausted. He releases him. He said, read. So why is that very forceful, very aggressive kind of physical encounter that he's having with him? It's a what? There is a way to wahi. One style, you mean, of communicating the wahi? Okay. You have to constrict before you expand. That's very deep, mashallah. Yes. To expand his heart. I think that aligns with this. Expand his heart to be ready for the message. Yes. The significance of the message. Yeah, because he told him later, إِنَّا سَنُلْقِي عَلَيْكَ قَوْلًا ثَقِيلًا. You're going to receive a heavy word. It is not just an easy thing. Any other thoughts? What? To get his attention? Okay. Yes.
Heard that. One opinion is that was because of how much the angel Jibreel loved the Prophet.
How much he loved the Prophet? Interesting. But he kind of hurt him. Right? The Prophet said that. He said, like, I was in pain. That's an interesting understanding too. Yes.
So wouldn't the Prophet know that he's an angel? That's kind of like proof that my power is beyond human.
My power. Whose power?
The angel's power.
The angel's power. Yes, to prove to him that this is coming from a different dimension of the universe. Okay. Any other thoughts? So all these are very like kind of valid understandings. I think there are two answers that just like are really hinting towards what I want to take that to, which is, again, these are valid. Something very important is he didn't want him to doubt the experience. Basically, he's telling him, this is real. I don't want you to go back and say, oh, maybe that was a dream. Maybe I'm just this hallucination. I'm imagining things. That could have been. And by the way, even after all of that, the Prophet ﷺ said to Khadija, لَقَدْ خَشِيتُ عَلَى نَفْسِي, and the implication was, I thought this is jinn. So he was, I don't know if it's very appropriate to say in a denial mode, but he was just in that situation like, I'm still not sure. I'm confused about this. But first, before we get to his reaction after he went back home, was really that you can't deny this. And by the way, there are a lot of philosophies that came later in the history of people trying to make prophecy about just experiential spiritual status. There isn't a real meaning of wahy. There isn't a real essence of revelation. The idea of communing with the divine, the idea of communication with the divine is not a thing. It's not a substantial thing. It's just some thoughts. If you do some certain spiritual practices, you might get some thoughts in your mind, right? And that was basically prophecy. So people who try to negate or deny the divine origins of the wahy would take that route. But from that time, Jibreel is telling him, this is real. To the extent that you feel it physically. And you're gonna go back home and you'll remember my hugs and my grabs, because you know that happened to you. Because if you see signs in your body somehow, or if you feel it, like that can't be just I wasn't just daydreaming, right? But when he went back and he had this discussion with Khadija radiallahu anha, he can again imply that he's denying this. Why? That also tells us that he wasn't really just looking forward to this. It wasn't something that he was just wishing for. I want something to just be different in society and just to be cool, and now I'm gonna start a new trend, right? I didn't really technically or specifically aspire for that. It's a gift from Allah. It's difficult. And he started by the time realizing this is a very, very critical matter, and this is gonna be a very tough mission. And he kept just thinking about it. SubhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him time, right? The wahy stopped for a couple of days, or actually more. And then just like think about it. We know the beautiful reaction of Khadija radiallahu anha and how she calmed him down. And the interesting thing, when she tried to calm him down, all the things she could think about is his social service, right? What could she identify as something good that he's doing? And she's not a Muslim. She doesn't still know what Islam is. She's telling him, why God, in whatever sense they believed in God before that, why God would want to do something bad to you? You really maintain very good connections with your family. You're very hospitable. Like you really honor guests a lot. You support the oppressed. So if you have these qualities, then inshallah God will not do something bad to you. And then they wanted to understand or to develop a kind of a line of understanding of the previous biblical traditions. So they went to Waraqa, as we know in the story. They went to Waraqa bin Nawfal, who was her relative, and then he explained to the Prophet ﷺ, right away he understood. And this is the knowledge that Allah has given him, of somebody who appreciates and understanding that lineage of prophecies from the biblical prophets until the Prophet ﷺ. He said, you're going to be a prophet. There's the same revelation that Musa received, and you're going to be driven out from your city. So he gave him the whole prophecy, and he died very early on, rahimahullah. So back to Iqra. Now Iqra, again, it's not just about read this text. Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, he said, al-qira'atu qira'atan. There are two different types of reading. Qira'atu kitabillahi al-mastur. Reading the written text of Revelation. It's a text, it's a book. I'm holding it, the words and sentences, I'm reading them. That's qira'ah, that's one reading. The second one, وَقِرَاءَةُ كِتَابِ اللَّهِ الْمَنْظُورِ, and reading the seen book of Allah, or the seen revelation, which is the universe. As if he's telling us that once you become Muslim, once you say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you put on new pair of glasses. You've seen things differently. And every reading you're doing in your life has to be through these pair of glasses. That's why that applies to everything, by the way, not just like the way we practice our religion. Even when we study, right? You know, there's philosophy of science, and every discipline has philosophy and has first principles. The way we even think and determine these first principles and philosophies will also depend on the worldview that you actually embody or that you actually employ. So when you think, I'm studying medicine, but I'm Muslim, my conceptualization of what a human body is different, right? My conceptualization and reverence to body parts is different, probably, from other philosophies. And it's not just like Islam versus secular. Talk about a lot of philosophies that existed in the world historically and today. So it's not just a duality of philosophy necessarily. So qira'ah is something beyond that. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ, or what I'm claiming that the Prophet ﷺ started to realize from the very first time. Jibreel told him, read something beyond reading this text. Let me take this a little bit further. And again, back to textual analysis. Iqra, he didn't just tell him read. So back to, we are the ummah of Iqra. Again, that's a good thing, don't get me wrong. But like, we're not just the ummah of Iqra. Because he just didn't tell him read. The ayah doesn't end on read. He said what? Iqra, bismi rabbik. Read in the name of your Lord. Again, people who study law, they love doing this kind of textual analysis. Now we have something called negative implication. Negative implication is, if I'm telling you stand up, it means that I'm telling you do not sit down. But I did not say do not sit down, but I'm implying it, right? So we can apply the same logic to the verse. Telling him read in the name of your Lord also implies do not read in the name of anyone else. So everything you're doing, you're reading, literally and metaphorically, in your life has to be in the name of your Lord. So ask yourself, when you choose your major university, or you pick your career, or do anything that furthers your education and understanding of this life, am I reading this in the name of my Lord or not in the name of my Lord? Because that's the test. That would really shapes your identity as a Muslim. I'm not just reading for the sake of reading. I'm reading for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why in the Islamic tradition, the taxonomies of ulum, of sciences, and ulum that are fard to be taught and pursued, and ulum that are recommended, ulum that are communal obligation, ulum that is basically not important, even haram, to study. Why? Because like, we're not here to entertain ourselves. It's a very temporary short life. We need to learn what actually benefits us. And what benefits us is doing everything in the name of Allah. If it's not in the name of Allah, it should be rejected outright. And this is the check that you should have all the time to check with, again, your education goals and career goals about, is this something in the broadest sense that you can think about? Is this something I'm doing for the sake of Allah or not for the sake of Allah? I'm sorry for going over time, possibly. And I'm sorry again for the random reflections. But just to summarize all of this is that the Quran provides us a holistic, let me use in a loose sense the word worldview that makes us really see things differently and have this revelation-based understanding of things and approach to things in our lives as well. And every time we read and recite the Quran, we should have this intention. You're not going to get the barakah of the Quran from the first time you read it, not from the 1,000 times you read it. You're going to always get this barakah. You can always read tafsir and get impressed about the breadth and depth of the scholarship. You can also maybe sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will inspire you with certain reflections on the Quran. These reflections, they're personal, they don't have to be authoritative in terms of like, you should tell Muslims this is how you understand the ayah. It's just like, there are these futuhat and reflections that Allah granted you when you are really trying to connect with the Quran in Ramadan or in the masjid or whatever your situation is. Allah opens up the doors of hikmah and knowledge and wisdom to people. And the secret in the Quran, just you need to pursue it. So it is not just based on certain prerequisites of knowledge. Because actually a very tricky thing about the Quran is that same ayah could further your guidance, same ayah could actually be a source of misguidance for some people. The Quran itself says that. وَإِذَا أُنزِلَتْ سُورَةٌ فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَقُولُ أَيُّكُمْ زَادَتْهُ هَذِهِ إِيمَانًا. When a surah is revealed, some of them said, mocking the Quran, which of you this surah has increased their faith? So Allah responds, فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا فَزَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا. As for those who believe, that's why you remember the Ruqya example. Those who really believe in the Quran, it will definitely increase their faith. إِيمَانًا عَلَى إِيمَانِهِمْ وَهُمْ يَسْتَبْشِرُونَ. And actually gives them good news and glad tidings. وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ. As for those people, by the way, all the pronouns refer to basically kind of same group of people. Same as what I mean, like same kind of society. So it could be people who are sharing a lot of things in common, right? Socially, educationally, they have a lot in common. When the Prophet ﷺ made the dua that Allah supports Islam with whatever Allah chooses from the two Umars, right? He combines Umar al-Khattab and Abu Jahl, right? His name wasn't Abu Jahl, but we know him to be Abu Jahl, right? See where Umar ended and where Abu Jahl ended. The Prophet was kind of neutral in that dua. We don't know what he had in his heart, Allahu A'lam, but like in his dua, he said, Ya Allah, just at least one of them becomes Muslim. Allah chooses Umar, radiallahu anhu. But I think of the Prophet ﷺ making that dua, right? And then what happened to Umar? What was the transformative experience that happened to Umar versus Abu Jahl? They both listened to the Quran. They both knew the Prophet ﷺ. They both had multiple discussions and debates with the Prophet and with the Sahaba and with each other. So they got enough knowledge. They got enough whatever it takes them to think about this decision. Umar was a very harsh opponent. Abu Jahl, of course, was too, until that very transformative point. Nothing really, it wasn't really a pure intellectual argument that convinced him. It wasn't like something that he had a public debate and then he got convinced. He was on his way to kill him, to kill the Prophet, ﷺ. And with the story, when somebody told him, like, okay, your sister has become Muslim, you didn't know, you should get your house in order. So he went home, he actually attacked her, he slapped her husband. Then once he read that sheet that has Quran, I'm so sorry to take that tangent and break the beautiful moment. That's a very interesting evidence for very early written Quran. So it's just like it's a topic I'm interested in, but that's on the side. But anyway, even though there are issues about the historicity of this story. But anyway, he read Surah Taha, other reports say Surah Al-Takwir, and then he read Taha, مَا أَنزَلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْقُرْآنَ لِتَشْقَىٰ. We have not given you the Quran to be miserable. At that moment, خلاص. Again, I'm not saying it's a one-time shot. Of course, maybe it had been building up. That we cannot neglect that human factor of building up. But he was on his way to kill him, right? At that moment, that kind of receptiveness, he just opened his heart. This is what the ayah is saying, right? أَمَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, that means your heart is receptive to the guidance. That's why the second group said, وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ, maybe Abu Jahl is a good example. Their hearts are ill. They have a problem with their hearts. So the problem is what? فَزَادَتْهُمْ رِجْسًا إِلَىٰ رِجْسِهِمْ. And rijs is a very kind of vulgar word. It's like it's a filth. It's really impure. It increased their impurity on top of their impurity already. وَمَاتُوا وَهُمْ كَافِرُونَ وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. And they died and they were not, and they were kafirun. May Allah protect us. So it looks like it's not just like about amount of knowledge, how much grammar in Arabic I know, or how much tafsir I know. Of course, these are important and very helpful, obviously, but it's really about your spiritual aptitude. If your heart is open enough, inshallah, let's promise each other for Ramadan is, inshallah, around the corner, to just like try to renew that connection with the Quran, that inshallah will open our hearts and will ask Allah to open our hearts to be more receptive to the guidance of the Quran. I mean, before I conclude, I hope Sheikh Jamal will give me, and you all give me the permission to just take 2 more minutes. I want to ask you 2 questions, if that's okay. The first question, what are the main issues or obstacles that you face when you try to reflect on the Quran? Like you say, like, okay, now I want to read, I want to understand, I want to connect with the meanings beyond the words. What are the main issues that you feel these are hindering your ability to really have this meaningful engagement with the Quran? Just like give me short, yes.
Is my understanding Islamically correct?
Is my understanding Islamically correct? Thank you. What else? Yes.
Difficulty focusing or other thoughts?
Okay, kind of khushu. Like how can I get my mind and heart together to focus? Beautiful. What else? Yes.
Being ignorant about the context with which each verse is revealed.
Okay, the historical context of the revelation. Beautiful. Yes.
Being too occupied and distracted with doing your stuff.
Being distracted ties to the same point. Thank you. What else? Yes. Understanding Arabic. Okay. Any other thoughts? Yes.
Finding a not too simple procedure, but at the same time not too advanced.
So lacking resources that address that. You're talking Arabic or English? Okay.
Like Arabic, see it. There's a lot of like jargon that like I'm not trained in like science. It's just very dry and like lack of accessibility.
Beautiful. Lack of accessibility to works tafsir. Any other different asbab or causes that again that affect our relationship with understanding? Yes.
Concern that like the way I'm reading it could lead to some type of faulty understanding if it's theological or about the Muslim.
Okay, ensuring that the understanding aligns with Islamic principles. Yes.
Feeling inadequate.
Feeling inadequate, like on the personal level to understand the meanings.
Or maybe worthy.
Worthy. So from a spiritual perspective or from like the prerequisites of knowledge to understand spiritual. Okay, so like it's beautiful. Any final thoughts? Yes.
Reading the text and thinking that
reading it as plain, but not knowing that if there's actually meaning behind what that statement.
Mm. So feeling unable to identify what is behind that. Okay. So when I read Qul Huwa Allahu Ahad, I understand that it talks about the oneness of Allah, but you feel like I should or I want to identify more meanings. That's beautiful. Jazakallah khair. Yes.
Connecting it to sort of like today's world.
Finding relevance. Yes.
Don't speak Arabic, but I enjoy tajweed and reading the Quran itself and melodiously. Sometimes I don't know whether I should concentrate on that or slow down, read it, and also read the translation.
Okay, beautiful. Jazakallah khair. That ties to the first, if you remember, the first tafsir of Yataghanna, about like how much we can take the tahsin al-sawt, the beautiful recitation to. Okay, Jazakallah khair. I think that really covers a very wide range of causes. My second question is related to one of the points that was mentioned, which is the language barrier. I think that's also a common thing. It's not just because Arab versus non-Arab. A lot of Arabs, it's very difficult. Still, that's a very like high level balagha and like rhetorical and very subtle in the way it constructs language. So it's not very easy to understand, at least what is beyond or behind the apparent meaning. So the second question, just out of curiosity, what is your to-go translation of the Quran that you regularly consult? I'm asking this for qualitative interview research I'm doing for your team. So just for myself. I'm joking, by the way.
Clear Quran and also Sheikh Nukal's recent translation. Phenomenal.
Beautiful. So clear Quran, then Sheikh Nukkal. What else?
The study Quran.
The study Quran.
Khalid Abul Fadl's tafsir.
Khalid Abul Fadl's tafsir. Okay. I saw, yes. Quran.com. Do you choose a particular translation or whatever comes up? Okay. I think the default's Abdul Halim, but I'm not sure. Probably the default, and then you can change it. Okay. Yes.
I recently discovered Shobit Tarawa as the Quran, and
Now this is select chapters, right? Yeah. Okay. Yes. Taqi Uthmani. Okay. Sahih International. Okay. Yousef Ali. Okay. That's the most diverse. I always ask this question, by the way, when I speak on the Quran. Is the most diverse set of answers I got. Usually I get like at least 6, 7 answers are the same, and then like I think the maximum number was 3 to 4, but we already got like mashallah 7 or 8. Okay. Any other more translations? But I'm sure sometimes we consult more than one translation or like we change. So I understand that. But I'm saying that like you to go one, like the one that you often find it like kind of relevant. It's kind of easy. You have it on your app or on your mushaf or like this is what I'm asking about. Not for very specific kind of reflective purposes. It's just like again, I want to know what that means. I'm just gonna open that one. Yes. The gracious Quran. I forgot which one. Zaki Hamad. Ah, okay. Okay, great. I think I saw someone here. Yes.
I generally still like the translation of Quran Mawdudi.
It's full translation, right? Okay.
But then I wasn't sure whether it was like a classical translation or not, so then I got 12 feet to 59. People have different ideas about a classical scholar is, but I personally like it.
No, it's all the questions we mentioned are fine. I'm just asking really for pure curiosity about like what's the again already diverse, mashallah, number of translations that we use. I think you want to Mawdudi, okay. Any other new translation? How many times you would open 3 to 4 translations if you really like feel like I get it, but that's not enough? طبعا شيخنا ما شاء الله. I think somebody raised their hand. Yes. You do that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a specific order of going through them? I'm getting too much, I know, into details, but
If I have a text translation, I have 2 different books.
okay.
And then I'll go online. And then someone mentioned Quran.com, they break it down word by word. If there's consistency across it, then I feel satisfied. But then if I talk to my mother and she tells me like 6 other meetings,
Okay.
My priority is MAS Halim first.
Halim.
Sahih Internationals, second.
Okay.
The top third.
Okay.
So rally for it.
Okay. Okay. By the way, that's a good exercise to do. in whatever order or whatever translations you prefer. It's actually interesting to see how the translators decided on what this word means in this context. And if they have footnotes about a little bit about the historical context, it's a beautiful experience. And that could be one out of so many different tips of like making the connection, the engagement like meaningful. Like it's really, it attracts me more to the text. It makes me really wonder more about the context and about the meaning. So that's something that is interesting. Jazakumullah khairan. May Allah bless all of you. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fill your hearts with iman and taqwa. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
No. Very happy with it. All right, assalamu alaikum. First of all, jazakumullah khairan to Sheikh Yousef. I really recommend you to follow his work, especially on the Yaqeen Institute. He's published a number of articles, mashallah, around the history of the Quran, different qira'ats, very, very beneficial things, mashallah. So continue to follow that work and benefit from that. You don't have to leave when we finish. People can hang out, talk to each other, stuff like that. Shireen, did you find anyone for, is it on me? All right. So we have a program tomorrow, special program tomorrow with Zain. Zain, can raise your hand, inshallah. We'll be on, get the exact, is the title going up? Is it going to be on, like, basically, can you give us the exact title, Zain? Do you remember?
Resilience through lifestyle, medical, and
Building resilience through lifestyle, medical, and dietary choices. There'll be a special seminar tomorrow on that. Everyone is welcome to come. Please sign up online, inshallah. We also, tomorrow after his program, it basically will be ending kind of around Maghrib time. So after Maghrib, we won't have like a full usual Sunday lecture, but we'll have something small and then we'll have dinner still. So if you come to both or one or the other, it's up to you. And also the Ramadan banquet is coming up. You should be seeing advertisements this coming week for tickets and things like that. So please do come and support. The date is March 9th, inshallah. Also, next weekend, we have seminary intensive round 2. First day, Saturday, will be Shaykha Muslima, second part of the 40 Hadith Nawawi. You don't have to have done the first part before. And the second day, Sunday, will be Art of Hospitality with someone else. And then everyone is encouraged to become a monthly donor. Welcome to everyone who came. Appreciate you coming, especially a deep gratitude to Sheikh Yousef. You had a very long day in travel, and we appreciate you coming out.
يا ربنا لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك ولعظيم سلطانك. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد في الأولين وفي الآخرين وفي الملأ الأعلى إلى يوم الدين. اللهم ألف بين قلوبنا وأصلح ذات بيننا. اللهم اجمعنا على طاعتك واحشرنا في زمرة حبيبك المصطفى صلى الله عليه وسلم. We ask Allah to reconcile our hearts together. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to fill our hearts with faith, piety, and fear of Him. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to fill our hearts with sincerity and to purify our intentions, to purify our objectives, and to purify our hearts. And we ask Him to send His blessings and greetings upon our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, his companions, and all of our righteous predecessors and scholars. Ameen, ameen. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
And one last thing, our apologies to you and to everyone for the mic, for the sound issues. Actually, it wasn't a mic issue, it's a receiver issue. As you guys know, we've come to this new place recently, and the speakers that we're using here are only a couple weeks old. But we had the hardware from the old place. So, we're seeing how it's warming up, and we're going to have to make some adjustments. But our apologies to you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.